It is such a huge honor to kick off our final day of the conference with an extraordinary disability advocate who has dedicated his life to teaching how to level the playing field for those who are underserved and underrepresented.
Max Barrows is Outreach Director for the Green Mountain Self-Advocates, a position he held since 2007. He mentors youth and adults with developmental disabilities to speak up for others, for themselves, and become leaders. Let's get a warm welcome to Max Barrows.
Welcome, Max.
Well, thank you very much for having me present to you all today. I am Max Barrows. As said, I am a self-advocate. I am a person on the autism spectrum. I live with my family in Vermont, share a house with them. I actually live in the sticks, as I call it, in a very small town. I get services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I am the outreach director for Green Mountain Self-Advocates. I am the assistant director for SARTAC, which stands for the Self-Advocacy Resource and Technical Assistance Center. Thank you for having me today and asking me to join your conference. And by the way, Green Mountain Self-Advocates is our statewide self-advocacy organization here in Vermont. All right. Next slide. So you may be wondering how I got to where I am now. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. So it goes back to middle school when I didn't know about my disability, but I knew something was up because of the way I was learning. I didn't want to show that I had a disability. I intentionally hid the fact that there was some, not so typical ways I was functioning in the world. I didn't want to feel that I needed help. I was afraid where that would land me. I wanted to fit in and learn like everyone else. I would falsely tell my teachers that I didn't miss anything. I didn't want my teachers to think there was something mentally wrong with me. But as time went on, I wanted to succeed. I started telling my teachers, I want to learn, but I can't learn the way you are teaching me. You look at me now and you see I have a career as a professional advocate. That was not the track I was on in high school. When many of my fellow students without disabilities were applying to college, I was stuck in the dish pit, washing dishes at a local pizza restaurant. In the self-advocacy world, we call this the death trap of, quote, low expectation syndrome. Society continues to send a strong message that we are not capable, we are too slow. It ties into the false idea that we are not able to do a lot of the things for ourselves like adults. Unfortunately, it is a pretty broadly accepted mindset. It is huge. It casts a shadow over our desires to work, go to college, get married, have kids, and the list goes on and on. A peer leader from Vermont said this, and I quote, "At work, when there is a big load of groceries, I try to keep up. It is hard to keep up. It's fast paced, and I cannot do a fast pace. At night, I write in my journal about work. I tell myself, it is okay to be slow." I want to say thank you to all of you for being our allies. Ableism has a tight grip on our lives. I want to thank you for moving the world closer to true inclusion. Thanks for recognizing that we have dreams like everyone else. We know what a real life looks like in our communities. And as self advocates becoming empowered said many years ago, let's just do it. Next slide. In high school, I joined Green Mountain Self Advocates. That is when I began to know my disability pride. When I got involved, I realized that I was not alone while facing tough times. It made me feel proud of who I am. Self advocates say, and I quote, "I don't care how different I am. I like it that way." Now I'm not afraid to express who I am and how I learn. I connect with peers and allies who understand me. They learn from me and I learn from them. This is our peer to peer connection. Once peers connect, it creates a safe and positive atmosphere where we can share what is on our minds without feeling timid. To be honest, sometimes assistance from people other than our peers can come across as sugar coated, biased, or controlling. Peer to peer connection empowers us to become better leaders. We believe in one another because we see capabilities in each other. Our peers help us to discover strengths we do not know we had of leadership within ourselves. We provide genuine feedback. We have high expectations for each other. We believe in each other as well as mentor each other. Next slide, please. Okay, who wants change? And if able, you can, raise, you can answer by raising your hand or on screen or with an emoji if you can, or, of course, jump up and down if you feel excited. I can't see you, but whatever you do, just express that if you want change. And my next question, okay, is this: who wants to change? And do the same thing. If you've expressed yes by raising your hand or on screen, or whatever you did to say what it is, and how you feel about that, I can see now that's what you're doing. I see thumbs up. That is great. As advocates, we want to, we often think that campaigns change what is out there in the world, but if we really want to get everyone on board with a shared vision, that is going to require us to make some changes ourselves. So keep that in mind. If you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, don't be surprised when you keep getting the same outcomes. Next slide, please. So I want to read a quote from Lydia XZ Brown, who's a powerful advocate that I have gotten to know over my work on a national level. She says, and I quote, "We will know that things are really changing when the people who have the most to lose are the ones who are making the decisions." End quote. As leaders, one of our most powerful tools is remembering that at any moment you can ask a question. One question I try to remember to ask is, who else needs to be here? As people with disabilities, our needs are constantly changing. So we need the people who get the services to be involved in planning and evaluating services to make sure they are effective. Hassan Ko, a friend and colleague of mine, says, and I quote, "We are not all the same. We need to be included so we can live life in our own way." And people are more invested in using services when we help develop them. Finally, involving us is one of the best ways to make sure you are using plain language. This way, we have talking points and advocacy materials that everyone can understand and use. Next slide, please. Intersectionality. This means when someone belongs to more than one oppressed group. For example, Jacob is a Black gay man who has an intellectual disability. All of these things intersect to make up Jacob's unique identity. As a Black man on the autism spectrum myself, I feel the negative judgment of both racism and ableism. Feeling both of these isms constantly reminds me of how I myself identify, and also of how my identities intersect. People do not always respect our rights and choices. Our society is set up to make it hard for people of color and people with disabilities to use our rights. Thank you for all you do so we feel welcome when getting services. No one should say that they can't help us because we are too complicated. I want people with disabilities to understand and accept me as a Black man. And I want people of color to understand and accept me as a person with a disability. I want both sides to continue to understand me as a whole person, no matter what my identities are. Next slide, please. Many self-advocacy organizations have a long history of leaders from diverse backgrounds. And we know we can do better to work effectively with people from any background and who speak any language. Next slide, please. Here is a legislative success story from Vermont. We worked for 2 years to pass a bill requiring Vermont laws to use respectful language when talking about people with disabilities. Self-advocates wanted all our laws to change, existing laws and new laws. But our allies and champions wanted to only require new laws to use respectful language. They had some legitimate reasons for not opening up existing laws to make changes. Now, we worked as a team with our allies. We stayed on message, and we continued to share our dream for a state where all our laws used respectful language. Then, you know what happened? Mother Nature stepped in. We got 11 inches of rain in one day. Towns were flooded and legislators took action. And much to our surprise, legislators used the term mental retardation when they drafted a bill to deal with flood and damages. This mistake by lawmakers helped us to make our point. We were able to cut a deal to open existing laws, to change language, and nothing else. We did the impossible. Everyone said it was impossible to do it, and we did it. Another example comes from the state of New York. As you may know, during COVID-19, many people with disabilities were brought to the hospital and not allowed to have their families or staff with them. There were enormous communication barriers. Many people with disabilities were scared and not able to advocate for themselves. In response, self-advocates teamed up with allies and fought to have supporters with us in the hospital during COVID-19. At first, it seemed impossible to challenge hospital safety rules put in place to fight the pandemic. Self-advocates and families told powerful stories. They used the Americans with Disabilities Act and won. Again, we did the impossible. Everyone said it was impossible to do it, and we did it. Next slide, please. Here are a few tips we learned from self-advocacy groups. Build relationships with decision makers before you need to ask them to support your issues. For example, self-advocacy groups are great at remembering to invite legislators when we are having a summer cookout. We ask them to stop by when we are doing leadership training. And when we connect with our policymakers, our top goal for all meetings is to build a relationship. Yes, we do make our key points, and we want to make a personal connection with the legislature. Next slide, please. Team up with a peer to support another peer. Use an interview style to help a shy person speak up even when testifying. Please resist the temptation to reword people's comments. The authentic voice of self-advocacy is not only powerful, it is refreshing to hear our issues discussed without all the jargon. And we teach ourselves how to pivot. What we mean by this is what to say when someone changes the subject. We pivot to get the conversation back on message. We say things like, I see your point. The way I look at it is, and another pivot is, that's a great question. Here's how I think about this issue. Next slide, please. I will end by talking about presuming competence. Believe we have abilities and do not assume what we can or cannot do. We understand you want to protect us, but we do not want to be protected from living our lives. Have high expectations. We have a large stake in how organizations representing our interests handle business. So please keep those in mind when you presume competence. It's another way of saying, don't judge a book by its cover. More of an in-depth way of looking at it. So I want to thank you for seeing us as equal partners when making policies. And when you do your work, and I urge you and encourage you to keep up the good work that you're doing, I want to thank you for giving us a chance, because we need to be given a chance. And please keep up your good work. And thank you so much for being our allies and for self-advocates. Be strong, continue to use your strength in your leadership skills. And remember, we're going to face tough times, but with your advocacy, with your voices, you have the power to overcome them. This world is tough, but we are just as tough as the world. So with that said, thank you very much. And thank you so much for having me present to you today.
Max, thank you for your words. Like really, really inspirational and eye-opening and thought-provoking. Thank you so much. I know we have people who are making a lot of comments in response. And if you have a question for Max or anything you want him to talk about, you can put that in the comments right now. One that I received, Max, and I want to ask you if that's okay, is for an advocate just starting on their journey, what advice would you give for somebody who wants to have an impact, wants to make a change, just doesn't know where to begin?
That's a good question. I'm going to say this. Self-advocacy. For me, and I had to learn this about myself. In order for you to be a good advocate or a good self-advocate, it starts with knowing yourself, knowing your disability, knowing how you operate, or in other words, how you see yourself. Knowing your disability is really where it starts. If you know your disability and how it affects your life, it's really gonna be the bread and butter of how to be an effective self-advocate. Because how are you going to know what you need and want in life and how to speak up for it if you don't know yourself internally? In other words, from the inside out. I had to teach that to myself, and I'm still learning a lot about myself in that regard. Another thing I want to say is be willing to make a mistake and forgive yourself, you know, and just be kind to yourself when you make a mistake. Some of the mistakes you make are going to be ones that you may first feel so bad about, but then looking back, it would be like you just laugh it off, like, ha, that was silly, but you know what? It wasn't that big a deal. So yeah, that's really what comes to mind for answering your question.
That's just, I mean, for every human being alive, an amazing response. Thanks, Max. I see a couple questions there, and I think we're going to have those posted. And I'll read them as well. Nicole, if you have any questions or comments for Max, please as well.
You're very inspiring with all your words that you're saying. Thank you so much. I was born to be a self-advocate, and some people need practice and don't know about the disability. That's what you just said. And I feel like we need more advocates like me and Lauren Potter and some other people in Hollywood that are people with disabilities. So thank you so much.
Well, I want to say that from what I heard earlier before I was on, I think I'm one of those people. I'm an individual who learns from other people. So like whatever you can teach me, whatever my peers can teach me, whether or not I know you or I just met you, you're a peer. I learn. It helps me become a better leader. So I just don't see. I mean, thank you so much for your compliment. It's not just about me; it's about all of us. I just think that whatever I can do to inspire people is as inspiring as what people do and can do for me. So listening and learning, I take to heart as I would expect when I present to my peers. That's what the peer-to-peer connection is all about. It's all about learning from each other and building self-esteem and really, adding to, our power by using ourselves as a resource. It's really the bread and butter of self-advocacy is the peer-to-peer connection.
Max, I see a great question there from Kavita. Thank you for being such an inspiring self-advocate. How do you think we ought to respond to family members who believe their developmentally disabled children are incapable of making any decisions on their own, those with, quote, severe needs?
The first thing that comes to mind is just listen, find out what they are afraid of. But I also want to just point out too that sometimes parents can be protective. And again, like I hit on before, it's okay to be protective, but not in the level of living our lives. I would say also, allow mistakes to happen with your son or daughter because, and we call this the dignity of risk. It's okay to make mistakes. That's how we learn. That's how I have to learn. I learn that every day. Everyone is going to fail at some point. Everyone is going to fall on their, fall down. But how are we going to learn to pick ourselves back up on our feet if we, don't fall down at some point? So allow us to, fail. I would say encourage the parent to bring their son or daughter to a self-advocacy group. Also, too, I think parents need to be listened to, listen to the parent. And again, like I said, in that regard, find out what they are afraid of. And also just focus on the person's strengths. What are they good at? What is it that they are, good at, and go from there. Because, again, once they discover strengths of themselves that they, may not have been aware of, it's going to come out and, go off that and build off that.
Max, again, just an incredible response and answer and inspiring message.
And
one last question I know there was if you could tell again which network you are connected with.
Can you repeat that question again? I'm so
Which
sorry.
network and organization you're connected with? I know some people were asking that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, the self-advocacy SARTAC, which stands for the Self-Advocacy Resource and Technical Assistance Center, which is a center for self-advocates, and it's it's where information is you know, brought to us and then sent out, created for and by self-advocates to help with strengthening self-advocacy organizations throughout the country. I'll just put the website in the chat. And Green Mountain Self Advocates, which is my statewide self advocacy organization here in Vermont, which I have been an outreach director for, which is the name of my position for uh, practically a decade and a half. It will be exactly, it's 15 years, pretty much. So yeah.
Max, there's just an incredible amount of comments and appreciation for your message. We really thank you for joining the ARC and UCP and Easter Seals Public Policy Conference. What a perfect way to start. We've been talking the last couple of days about envisioning our future, and now we're talking about achieving it. And I think this is an absolutely perfect way to kick that off. Nicole, any last words for Max?
Thank you again for taking the time, and thank you for inspiring others to be a really good self-advocate. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I am so honored just to speak to you all today and also learn from all of you. So it helps me continue to become a better leader. So thank you so much.
Max, we appreciate you being here. Thank you for kicking off our day 3 of the conference. And I know we will stay connected, and people have your websites and contact info now. So Max, thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. Max Barrows, incredible kickoff. Man, I could just stop now and be like, I am full of inspiration